convened as of 5:34 p.m. I would respectfully ask everyone to remain muted unless you're recognized to speak. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Please note that the official meetings of the RTD Board of Directors are being held remotely in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare. The official meetings of the Board of Directors will be held via Zoom and will be audio and video recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meetings, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. Visit rtd-denver.com. And a live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. Colleagues, being elected as a member of this body imposes an ethical obligation for each of us to enhance and maintain the public confidence in this agency. As a board of directors, it is our collective duty to our constituents, stakeholders, and staff to conduct our business in an atmosphere of mutual respect, cooperation, civility, trust, and collegiality. These are values we can all agree upon. As such, I encourage each of us to review the operating guidelines adopted by this board and to act in accordance with those principles, which are available on the Board of Directors page on the RTD website. Thank you. Director Cook, you will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Chair. If you would all join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next time we'll get a metronome. We were kind of slow on that one. But thank you, Director Cook. Next is the land acknowledgement. I'm going to request that Director Rivera-Malpiedi please read out loud the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The RTD Board of Directors acknowledges that the land on which our buses and trains operate is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and other contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to these lands. We honor our Indigenous elders who have traveled, inhabited, and stewarded these mountains, hills, and plains throughout generations. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of inequity of the Native and all historically oppressed peoples, and recognize their current and future contributions in the district as we move forward.
Thank you for that, Director Rivera-Malpiedi. Ms. McManus, would you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Director Bouquet.
Present.
Director Broom.
Present.
Director Busick.
Here.
Chair Busick. Director Catlin. Director Cook.
Here.
Director Davidson.
Here.
Director Deschel. Director Geisinger.
Here.
Director Lewis.
Present.
Director Rivera-Malpiedi.
Here.
Director Rosenthal.
Present.
Director Sloan.
Here.
Director Tisdale.
Present.
Director Whitmore.
Present.
Director Williams.
Good evening. I am here.
13 accounted for. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And Directors Catlin and Deschel both notified me of their absence in advance, and I will record those as excused absences. With 13 present and 2 absent, we have a quorum. There are no retiree awards for this evening. Second quarter retiree awards will be announced at the June Board of Directors meeting. Next is our public participation period, which is open to anyone who would like to address the board. Those who would like to address the board but are unable to attend board meetings can submit their comments in writing at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. Barbara, were there any emailed comments received for this meeting? You're on mute.
Yeah, yes, there were.
Thank you. So those email comments, I believe, were sent to all the board members and will be added to the record of this meeting. We'll move on from there. If anyone is present and wishes to speak and you've not already done so, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. Staff will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. If you are dialed in, press *6 to toggle your mute settings. Please bear in mind that by participating in this process, you are being recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, then your comments will have to be submitted in writing. If any speaker has documentation or reference materials for the board, please email those materials to the board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. During this time, the board will not offer comments or responses. Directors or staff may contact speakers following their comments if they raise matters that lend themselves to follow-up. Speakers should begin their remarks by stating their names, and each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. Ms. McManus, do we have any speakers in the queue?
Yes, we have M. Scott Ramming, PhD, PE in the queue. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Ramming, please state your name and let us hear your comments, please. And Mr. Ramming, we're not hearing you.
I was apparently just unmuted.
There you go.
This is Dr. Michael Scott Ramming. Live near the 30th and Downing and 38th and Balake stations on the east side. For those directors who aren't that active on Twitter, you might be interested in knowing that there was a thread where one of the local reporters was passing through the Union Station, had taken an RTD train in and wished to use the restroom in what's the Crawford Hotel lobby, and was told by the security guard that RTD passengers are not permitted to do so unless they make a purchase or are hotel guests. And I believe I've been told similar information from the Telephone Information Center that the 99-year lease, or whatever the term is, to the Crawford Hotel does not allow or does not require them to permit RTD passengers access to the restrooms. And I think that was unconscionable when it was agreed. It's unconscionable now for a place that calls itself Denver's living room if members of the Denver family, to extend the metaphor beyond recognition, are not permitted within the living room. It doesn't really seem a good metaphor. So I would urge RTD to do whatever it can to allow its passengers, from the people who ride the Flatiron Flyer to those who ride local buses, to have some facilities at Union Station. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. Ramming. Are there any more speakers, Ms. McManus?
No, there's no other speakers in the queue.
With no other participants in the queue, we will close the public participation period at this time. Next are the external entities reports. The Access-a-Ride Paratransit Advisory Committee, APAC, does not have an update this month, but is likely to present a report at the May 24th board meeting. We look forward to hearing from Mr. Elam during his next report. The Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities, ACPD, will be presented by Mr. Jamie Lewis. Mr. Lewis, please start when you're ready.
Chair Buzek, Mr.
Yes.
Lewis is not here this evening because the report was given 2 weeks ago and there was nothing new to add. So he asked to be excused, and he will report on the next meeting, which happens in the middle of May.
Yeah, May 24th. Perfect. That's great. Thanks for that information, Director Williams. The Citizens Advisory Committee, CAC, will be presented by Mr. Matt Applebaum. Mr. Applebaum, if you are here, please introduce your report.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much. This will be quick. We did have a meeting last week. We actually did it in person. It was off-site, and people, of course, could Zoom in as well. It was very nice to meet some of our new members, and I know we're going to be getting some additional new members shortly that you'll be appointing, and we hope to meet with them in person as well. It was also really nice to meet our new staff liaison, Brandon Bigliolino, who was nice enough to join us at the meeting. Just quickly, our meeting was, since we met mostly in person, was really about what the role of the CAC is and how to make it work better. So we talked about how to better provide input to you on the board, how we can discuss issues in a timely manner, which is difficult, that we get them soon enough that we can actually have a conversation, come up with some ideas and present them to you before your meeting on the same issue, how we can remain engaged in a number of key long-term issues like Reimagine and the FAIR study, and how we can have more in-depth conversations with the staff. I wouldn't say we solved all those problems, but it was a good conversation. And you will soon be hearing from each of us, as I think you know. We're going to restart the 2-on-1 meetings, 2 members of the CAC with a member of the board, and those have been scheduled, I think, starting next week and then through May and maybe early June. And our members will be talking to each of you about very much the same issues. How can the CAC serve you better? How can we get input to you? How can we stay abreast of what's going on? We would love your thoughts on that, and try to figure out how to do a better job in the coming year. And that's really the report. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for that report. And I have my 2-on-1 tomorrow. So
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do. I'll see you then.
And me. Looking forward to seeing you. And thanks to all of you so much for taking the time to meet with us. We really do appreciate it.
Great. And directors, make sure if you haven't already to get those scheduled. They're very productive. Thanks for that report. Next, we're going to move on to the audit ad hoc. Oh, and we're going to notice Director Deschel is present. So we have 14 present, 1 absent at this point. Directors Davidson and Deschel, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll keep this brief in Director Catlin's absence, who is chairing the committee. We have been making progress. I believe we will have a forthcoming discussion item that has been postponed to a future board meeting when Director Catlin will be here to more fully update the board on our progress. We are in the stages of procurement for retaining contracted services for the internal audit function. Additionally, our committee has compiled open questions for further research that our committee has regarding the formation of a long-term standing ad hoc committee, audit committee, which again, we will update the board on once we've retained the services of our contractor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you for that report, and thanks for the work on that important committee. Next, we're going to move on to the Tabor Ad Hoc Committee report. Directors Cook and Broom, do you have anything you'd like to report this evening?
Yeah, I'll start off. If Director Broom would like to add anything, I invite him to do that. We had our first meeting, an informational session, basically on April 11, with discussion of finances in Tabor presented by Doug McLeod, our CFO. And, you know, there were really good questions and some points made as to our charge, what our timeline should be, the communications plan, and whether and how we might consider or recommend regarding other potential elements of a ballot issue. I think it helped to frame some of the work that we need to do going forward. One of the questions was whether we are only one of a few, or are we one of many other entities within our district or in the state who have not debruced yet. And actually, Director Tisdale pulled up some interesting stats, so I thought I'd recount those. He noted that 174 of 178 school districts have debruced, 85% of municipalities, and 51 of 64 counties. So it sounds like it's been pretty prevalent, and we can hope that that points the way for us. Our next meeting is Monday, May 9 at 3 p.m. And that will be a continuation of financial aspects of the Tabor issue and of debrucing. Mr. Broom, Director Broom.
I think that was a fairly comprehensive report. We still got a lot of work in front of us, and we're still in the information collecting phase. So if anybody has any ideas or thoughts, please contact us.
Great. Thanks for that report. And those statistics seem like those should be front and center in any campaign that may come down the road, because that's pretty telling. So good deal. Thanks. Next is the Finance and Planning Committee report. Committee Chair Davidson, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. At our board retreat, we did discuss the importance of the committee chairs providing a more comprehensive update now that we no longer have committees of the whole. So I will try to be a little bit more comprehensive this evening. Certainly, I invite my colleagues to provide me with any feedback as to how I can improve this, particularly for the non-committee members who may not have been in attendance. On the April 12th meeting, we started by receiving a presentation and report on the updated sales and use tax forecast from CU Leeds School of Business. The March 2022 model that they presented reflected a projected improvement from our current midterm financial plan forecast for the sales and use tax, representing a 3.9% increase. There was some discussion regarding whether and how inflation could offset some of that increase and impact our midterm financial plan more adversely. And CFO Doug McLeod confirmed that we can change and will change our inflation variable when it comes to expenditure decision-making within the existing midterm financial plan. We then moved on to recommended actions. The committee voted unanimously on the recommended action to approve a budget transfer of $6 million from the unrestricted fund balance to the light rail maintenance of way for coping panel repairs, and to authorize the general manager and CEO or her designee to enter into a contract to complete the repairs. That recommended action is on the agenda this evening. As a discussion item, the committee received an update regarding the Colorado 119 BRT implementation. We confirmed in the discussion that ensued after the update that RTD does remain committed to contributing the $33 million that have been allocated, regardless of the result of the RAISE grant application submitted by our partners. This is because the project, as stated by staff, can be phased and is also modular. For the benefit of those that were not there at the update, from a financial perspective, the funding that RTD has committed is going towards stations, park and rides, and enhanced bus stops. In addition, RTD is collaborating with CDOT as a partner to determine what the funding needs are for Q bypass lanes, which we had some discussion that can increase the travel time by as much as 50% in the maximum congested times, according to some of the current models. As an additional discussion item, we received information regarding the financial impact to provide fare free transit on general election days. The approximate cost was reported by General Manager and CEO Johnson as $357,000, including expenses for fare replacement, light rail, law enforcement and security, and marketing. We then had a discussion. During the discussion, it was highlighted by Director Bouquet and General Manager and CEO Johnson that many U.S. transit agencies have implemented fare-free transit on election days, providing some precedent. CEO and General Manager Johnson also highlighted the statistic that was included in the board packet from the 2016 survey of the performance of American elections by MIT that stated that approximately 30% of non-voters across the country claimed that lack of transportation was a factor in deciding not to vote. The committee had a robust discussion about whether or not it would be favorable to proceeding with a recommended action at a future date to provide fare-free transit on election days. The committee raised various concerns and questions as to whether fare-free transit on election days would help in a state that does do mail-in ballots. Numerous directors suggested that we should and could engage with the Secretary of State and county clerks to determine whether this might be an effective strategy, but also to engage with them to cooperate on any potential program should we implement one. We discussed the possibility of doing this for a single year and floated the idea of a pilot, which was something General Manager and CEO Johnson stated she had prior experience in initiating and shepherding. The committee was generally favorable towards the idea of a staff-led recommended action, provided that it included some level of staff engagement with Secretary of State and/or county clerk. General Manager and CEO Johnson and her staff will leverage the feedback and have the next steps to bring back a proposal for next steps to the board. During other matters, Director Broom inquired whether there were any updates regarding pending litigation with the Denver Transit Partners. General Counsel Melanie Snyder informed the committee that there are no updates at this time. Also, during other matters, Director Deschel inquired whether staff has what it needs to move forward with the refinancing of the 2013 and 14 certificates of participation, or COPs, in a timely fashion, especially considering potential increases to interest rates. General Manager and CEO Johnson, as well as Chief Financial Officer Doug McLeod, confirmed that they have what they need and committed to bring a recommended action to the committee in the June timeframe. And just a note for my colleagues here that we did since receive follow-up from bond counsel with regards to the refinancing decision as to whether or not to leverage the Fast Tracks bonding authority. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report. The next Finance and Planning Committee meeting will be on May 10th, 2022. Thank you.
Thanks for that report. Next is the Operations and Safety Committee report. Committee Chair Rosenthal, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm afraid I do not have anything to report because our April 13 meeting was canceled. That's all I have at this time.
Thanks for that. Next is our Performance Committee report. Committee Chair Lewis, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a few updates here. So as you all know, our 2021 through our 2026 strategic plan is a fundamental shift to reframing the value of transit in terms of outcomes. RTD will really focus our resources and our energies on community value, customer excellence, employee ownership, and financial success. This plan, which I'm pretty excited about, really creates a singular focus for us and vision as we move forward. While the Performance Committee hasn't had any meetings thus far, I just want to let you all know that the work to implement the strategic plan has begun, including, not limited to, I have a more exhaustive list, the refinement of metrics, objectives, and goals, as well as individual metrics with baseline data, have gone through a RACI analysis, which I think efforts to align actions from our Reimagine RTD to the strategic plan, which I think is important. Our general manager also shared with me something that I thought was pretty exciting, was an opportunity to join 8 other transit agencies as early adopters on TransDash, which is a tool for measuring and communicating the value of transit at a national level, which allows us to have peer comparison and provides a quarterly dashboard on the metrics. And I know board directors are often asking about those peers, and so this is an opportunity to do so. The dashboards would include climate, health, volume, congestion, community relevance, quality, productivity, access, and economic impact. And so there are a few next steps that are in place, but I think the main one, and many of the members of that committee should have been surveyed for the times and dates that you're able to meet. We will begin receiving progress updates in the Performance Committee beginning in June 2022, with following meetings in September 2022 and another in January 2023. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Oh, thank you for the report. I know. So anybody have any questions for Director Lewis for her report? Thanks for that report. Great, we're going to move on then to the approval of the board meeting minutes and committee reports. The board and committee minutes were included in the board packet. Are there any corrections from any director? Unless there's an objection, I'm going to consider the minutes for the following meetings in a motion. March 22 board meeting, April 12 special board meeting, April 12 Finance and Planning Committee, April 21 Executive Committee. And do I have a motion for approval of those minutes?
Move approval.
Second.
I heard Director Broom as the movant and Director Whitmore as the second. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, are there any objections, any no votes to this motion? And seeing none, that passes unanimously 14-0. Next is the chair's report. Just a few things to report on. There was a groundbreaking for the 16th Street Mall project that took place a couple of weeks ago on, Director Deschel was with me, on the 14th of April. Director Deschel and I were present, as well as a number of members of senior leadership team, senior manager Fred Worthen gave comments and remarks on behalf of RTD and did a fantastic job, Mr. Worthen. At our executive committee meeting, we had a report, a monthly government relations report from Mike Davies. You all get the monthly update on bill tracking, which I think is pretty invaluable, and keep abreast of all that. Under other matters, we talked about the reinstatement of travel budgets for directors. And at the May 10th finance meeting, I will be introducing a recommended action to reinstate travel budgets for directors for the latter half of this year. We also talked about post-COVID meeting expectations. There's been some email communication back and forth from the general manager's office and some other directors. In a nutshell, our meetings of the board are unlikely to resume anytime before the fall of this year, if then. It's primarily due to IT work that is taking place in the RT&D boardroom. So that's underway and not ready for us to be there. We also had discussions about the possibility of some of the smaller committees to have their meetings in person and what that might look like. I've asked Ms. McManus to put together a list of items that are important for us all to consider if that happens, and run that past our general counsel to make sure we're compliant with open meetings laws and so forth, and also to look at the impact on staff and staffing meetings like that. We're also having ongoing discussions of small informal meetings of 3 or more directors and how we can make those happen and be compliant with the open meetings law. So that discussion continues. Finally, we talked about the board retreat and the summary that we've all obtained from CDR Associates. At the May Executive Committee meeting, I intend to have put together a list of items submitted by executive committee members, and I invite any other board member to submit a similar list regarding what items came out of our retreat that are operational or administrative in nature that need to be put in some kind of context, and what are those that are going to require bylaw change. So at the May meeting, I hope to have that list put together, and hopefully by the June executive committee meeting, have it on our executive committee agenda as an action item to come out for a full board vote with regard to any bylaw changes that are required for the action items that we discussed at the board retreat. At this point, if there are no questions for me, if there are, I'll take them now. Seeing none, I'm going to give Director Rivera Malpiedi a couple of minutes of time to discuss and follow up with regarding an email that she sent out earlier. Director Rivera Malpiedi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You all received an email this afternoon from the chair and me regarding the resolution on the regional commitment to ensuring a welcome transit environment. We have outlined, and actually for really great, I had a meeting with our general manager, Mr. Ford, Mr. Davies, and Christina Zazuda to start working on an outreach plan. I outlined it for all of you, and I will be calling each of you to see how you would like to proceed. I am ready to start setting up tours and briefings for every board member if they would like them. So I'll be giving you all a call, and I'll be hanging out at Union Station for a really long time. So if you have any questions, let me know, but I will be calling you. And if you have folks that you want to invite to be briefed with you, we are happy to put in that work on your behalf or in collaboration with you, or however you want to do that. And if not, that's okay too. Happy to do it at Union Station, at RTD, by Zoom. We really want this platform to be very comforting to every board member so that they're able to get the information. I also would just like to remind everybody that last Friday, Tina Hawkes sent out an email to all of us with the new website, Restoring a Welcoming Environment. If you haven't had a chance to see it, it's really quite quite extraordinary. It is a fluid document, so it will be updated on a regular kind of plan. But one of the things that I really like about this is that there's an entire community engagement component where people can sign up for newsletters to be updated on a regular basis, as well as for feedback or questions, so that we're able to do real-time information for community members as we move forward. So that's my report for now, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to take any questions, or I could just call everybody.
Thanks. Any question for Director Rivera-Malpiedi? Director Lewis.
I actually don't have a question. I just have a comment, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please. Go
You're
ahead.
shaking your head. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't get.
Okay, that's okay. Director Deschelle and I had the opportunity to visit Lisa at the Harm Reduction Center. So the Harm Reduction Center, for directors that are not familiar, is a place that really promotes public health by ensuring that people who inject drugs are educated and equipped with the tools to reduce the spread of diseases such as HIV, hepatitis C, and to really eliminate the overdoses. And I know we've been talking quite a bit about fentanyl. Lisa has been generous in inviting each of us to tour her facility. For those who have had the opportunity to tour, I learned quite a lot about just quite frankly, a lot of things that I hadn't known. And so Lisa has agreed to offer for directors to also tour her facility. She typically does it in early mornings or in the afternoon. That's after 4 o'clock. And so I'm happy to connect you all. Director Geisinger is also going to be touring the facility. And I hope she learns just as much as I did. And so extending that opportunity to directors.
Great. Thanks for that, Director Lewis. So anybody that is interested, please reach out to Director Lewis. Is that okay? I'm giving you that job. Okay. First Vice Chair Geisinger.
Just to say that that Director Lewis made that connection with Lisa for me today, and she's asked me to come up with some times in the next couple of weeks. So if anybody's interested, we could join forces potentially and go over there. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks for that. General Manager and CEO Johnson, the time has come for your report.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good evening to all of you. And I do want to say I'm excited to hear that some of you are going to the Harm Reduction Center. As many of you know, that I've had the opportunity to engage with the Executive Director, Lisa Revelle, at the Harm Reduction Center, and I've spoken to several of you, and trust and believe it will be an eye-opening experience. It'll enable you to lean in and understand and be more empathetic as relates to all the issues that are prevalent and why oftentimes people view individuals in that space as being service resistant. It's a lot more to that. And so I welcome the opportunity to engage with you and hear your thoughts after you have the opportunity, if you elect to do so. So thank you very much for that, Director Lewis and Director Geisinger, as well as Mr. Chair and Director Rivera-Malpiedi for engaging and coordinating these events, and want you all to know that staff is readily available to help support any type of connections in which you've made and need to hand off to staff to help facilitate. So look forward to hearing about all of that. So with that, as introduced, I'm Deborah Johnson, the General Manager and CEO here at the Regional Transportation District. And in addition to the subject matter we just talked about, I will also provide information with you centered around our strategic priorities. And as relates to community value, I will be discussing RTD's participation in the Federal Transit Administration Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet Challenge. Additionally, I'll speak about the Transit Vehicle Innovation Deployment Centers meeting that I participated in this past week in Atlanta, and my participation in recent speaking engagements on behalf of the agency. As it relates to customer excellence, I will share information regarding our continuing efforts at Denver Union Station, which you have heard a little bit about this evening, and then closing out relating to employee ownership. I will touch upon the agency's ongoing COVID-19 pandemic responses. So as I had mentioned during the meeting last month in March, And in an email yesterday addressed to all of you, RTD is participating in the Federal Transit Administration Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet Challenge. Our response to this voluntary challenge directly aligns with elements of the strategic plan, in particular, the strategic priority of community value, which states that RTD strives to be a community partner, providing value to customers as well as to the Denver metro region while sustaining planet Earth. I'm happy to share that the agency has completed its climate action plan and submitted the report to FTA on April 15th. The plan describes current efforts among RTD and state policymakers regarding greenhouse gas reduction initiatives, and further, the plan illustrates RTD's emission reduction goals and targets in 3 key areas, namely increasing transit use and the reduction of single occupant vehicle trips, decreasing carbon dioxide emissions resulting from fleet, fuel, and facilities, and using an agency-wide approach to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increasing sustainability. Last Thursday, that's why I wasn't in attendance at the executive committee, I was invited by the Center for Transportation and the Environment on behalf of the Federal Transit Administration to participate as a member of an advisory panel. And the purpose of the meeting was to discuss research conducted by the Federal Transit Administration regarding transit vehicle innovation deployment. The program is funded by FTA to research the advancement, production, and deployment of advanced vehicle technologies and infrastructure within the public transportation sector. The program, managed by the Center for Transportation and the Environment and CalSTART, which is a national nonprofit accelerating clean transportation technologies, assembled the panel to meet and develop suggested solutions to the challenges of continued innovation, deployment, and adoption of zero-emission transit technologies. The participants also discussed the need for workforce development, and workforce in and of itself is people power, leadership, and technology development and training, and a requirement of federal low, we call it low no, so it's low and zero emission bus funding opportunities. So the meeting was moderated by CTE. In addition to me, other participants included transit leaders from MARTA, which is, of course, in Atlanta, the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, LA Metro, Mountain Line Transit in Missoula, Montana, CAP Metro in Austin, Texas. And in addition to these leaders from the agencies, there were zero emission bus manufacturers, researchers from Penn State, the Ohio State University, as well as Auburn. There was union representatives from Amalgamated Transit Union, as well as Transport Workers Union, reps from the Department of Energy, FTA's Division of Research, Innovation, and Demonstration, and the National Transit Institute and the Transportation Learning Center. So CTE will provide a summary report to the Federal Transit Administration by the latter part of next month. Additionally, over the past month, as the state and the nation have begun to reopen and industry and community groups have resumed in-person activities, I have been able to take part in several speaking engagements here in the Denver metro area. On Wednesday, April 6th, I attended a Metro Mayor's Caucus meeting and participated in a panel discussion with Doug Rex from the Denver Regional Council of Governments and Shoshana Liu, the Executive Director of CDOT, to discuss metro mobility and air quality changes as well as challenges. During the portion of my discussion, I talked about our strat plan, our labor environment, and the recently ratified and adopted by you all collective bargaining agreement with ATU 1001, budgetary considerations, and our collaborative efforts to improve air quality, which includes, of course, our plan for additional zero emission buses and a fare-free transit demonstration program. From April 9th through the 11th, the American Public Transportation Association CEO seminar was held here in Denver, and more than 100 chief executive leaders and deputies from transit agencies across the country came to participate and engage in thoughtful dialogue. During the seminar, I, along with Denver Mayor Michael Hancock, the CEOs from Monterey Salinas Transit and the Northern California and Central Ohio Transit Authority and the Maryland Transit Administration. We participated in a session moderated by the CEO of SEPTA, which is the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, in and around Greater Philadelphia, to discuss post-pandemic future. The core of the discussion really was about transit with respect to health, equity, and the vitality of communities served, as well as fundamental changes that have taken place and whether those changes have impacted their overall need for and delivery of public transit services. I also participated in an important two-part session entitled Protecting the Emotional and Mental Health of the CEO, in which panelists shared personal reflections regarding the impacts of stress and isolation on CEO performance, as well as physical and mental health. This session offered an opportunity for CEOs to share their approaches for decompressing, venting, and managing the stress and pressures associated with leading a transit agency, along with the need for finding mental health and emotional health supports. The panel was moderated by Dr. Blase Aguirre. He's the medical director of McLean Hospital in Boston and assistant professor of psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School. Along with the moderation of Dr. Aguirre, there was the GM CEO of Santa Clara Valley Transit Authority, and it was important to hear from her, recognizing the unfortunate circumstance that took place in VTA May of last year, where there was the mass shooting. And additionally, there was the CEO of the Port Authority of Allegheny, which is Greater Pittsburgh. Additionally, I engaged in a separate session regarding zero emission buses and the implementation and related infrastructure needed, the lessons learned, and the working relationships with utility providers and bus manufacturers. The panel was moderated by the CEO of CAP Metro in Austin, Texas, and I was joined by colleagues from King County Metro in Seattle and South Coast British Columbia Transportation Authority in Westminster, British Columbia. On Monday, April 18th, I served as the keynote speaker at the annual meeting of the Lower Downtown Neighborhood Association, which is a city registered neighborhood association representing residents in Denver's Lodo area. Interim Police Chief Steve Martingano accompanied me to the meeting, and the main topic of discussion during this engagement was the unwelcome activities plaguing the Denver metro area. I shared with the Lodo Association the enhancements taking place in and around Denver Union Station, the bus concourse, and we all agreed that we anticipated to have a positive ripple effect throughout the transit system. And speaking of those enhancements, Director Malpietti referenced this during the course of her comments, but we launched the webpage describing the improvements. I sent an email to all of you on Friday, and in turn, you probably received a copy of the press advisory as well. And we have shared this through a myriad of public media outlets. For those interested, the link to the webpage can be found by visiting the News Stop page on RTD's main website. The webpage is dynamic and will be updated as progress is made regarding the short, midterm, and long-term project milestones, which will eventually culminate with the establishment of a paid fare area. Thus far, since Friday, April 22nd, the webpage has garnered 380 views from 213 unique users. Further, there have been 9,997 social media impressions, and that was as of about 2 o'clock today. So let me just put that in perspective for you all. With an additional 788 engagements, meaning that individuals have viewed information regarding DUS efforts nearly 10,000 times in the past few days and have shared or reacted to RTD's post on this topic nearly 800 times. Yesterday, our public relations team reached out to all the transportation management organizations and associations, as well as the public information officers for the municipalities within the regional transportation district, and requested that they share the webpage on their respective communication channels. Staff will again promote the webpage through social media channels tomorrow, Wednesday, April 27th, and will also have it shared via the May issue of the Read and Ride publication. As for complementary efforts underway to address unwanted activities throughout the Denver metro area, RTD is partnering with municipalities in the area, in the region, I should say, to creatively provide supplemental services to individuals in need through the provision of wellness clinics, legal assistance, and mobile showers adjacent to transit facilities. Now I'll transition to employee ownership. As all of you are aware, last Monday on the 18th, the U.S. District Court ordered vacating the federal facial covering mandate for public transportation and transportation hubs. That same day, the Transportation Security Administration stated that facial covering requirements would no longer be enforced. As a result, last Tuesday, RTD discontinued its own mask enforcement protocols aboard revenue and non-revenue vehicles and in our administrative offices and transit and operation facilities. One thing I want to be clear about is that the Centers for Disease Control recommends facial coverings in indoor public transportation settings at this time. As such, employees and customers can choose to continue to wear facial coverings, though they are not required to do so. It is encouraging to note that despite a modest uptick in overall COVID-19 cases in Colorado, transmission rates remain low. According to CDC data from last Thursday, the 21st of April, only one county in Colorado, namely Pitkin County on the western slope, is considered to be in the medium transmission category, whereas all others are considered to have low transmission rates. The leadership team and I will continue to monitor health data and state and federal guidance to determine whether additional revisions to masking, building capacity limitations, or other health protocols are in order. So that concludes my report for this evening. I appreciate the attention. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will yield the floor back to you. Thank you very kindly.
Great. I see Director Broom has his hand up for a question.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have a question, but I have a comment. I think it'd be helpful to the board if we could get a presentation by the RAC or some other state agency on the new ozone requirements and how it would impact RTD. We were very close to meeting the old standards for ozone, and then, of course, the EPA has moved the goalpost. The other thing is, it's interesting to note that a lot of the pollution is not where you think it is. The station at Chatfield Reservoir is always one of the highest areas for concentrations of gases, which surprises a lot of people. And so it'd be helpful, I think, to the board to have some feel for where the problems are severe and how we might be able to help alleviate them. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments. Director Cook?
Thank you. A quick question, then just forward something that had come to me from a couple of constituents. Do we know when we'll be looking at fall service changes, and is there a capability of adding service at that point? The particular question I'd had to do with access to Civic Center. You know, currently people who come in from the north or northwest need to get off the bus or whatever, the train at Union Station, and then take the 16th Street Mall shuttle or the 15. And this person reached out in the wake of newspaper reporting that talked about those two lines in particular being among the most accident or violence prone routes. And so I wondered if that's the sort of thing that you can weigh in terms of your decision making about providing the restoration of some service. I told her about the FF4, which now will have a stop at US 36 in Sheridan once it's restored, and then also the Metro ride. But I just wondered about the timing and how you factor in those kinds of pieces or input.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you very kindly, and thank you for your comments, Director Cook. And I would like to qualify for everybody assembled, recognizing that the 15 along Colfax Avenue is our most heavily utilized route. And so when there is the perception of so-called violence and things of the like, it's due to the propensity of the volume in which we're carrying. And that would hold true for, 16, the Mall Street shuttle, in the sense of being free. So recognizing where we are collectively at the Operations and Safety Committee that's going to convene next month, there will be a presentation from staff as relates to prospective service changes going forward. And when we look at things holistically, with the perception of violence or whatever activity, as we know, it's interwoven into the communities in which we serve. So we look at it from a deployment vantage point in relationship to resources. And we will provide information to you at such time as we look at it through an equity lens in reference to ensuring that we are addressing the needs holistically from a regional perspective.
So you said next Operations Committee. Did I hear that right?
That is correct, Director Cook. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, and thanks, General Manager Johnson. We're going to move on to the unanimous consent item. There's one item on the unanimous consent agenda listed under item Roman 16 as item A, and that is coping panel budget transfer. If anyone has a change to or has questions on this item, please feel free to let me know at this time. I'll be happy to remove it, move it on to the recommended action agenda if that is the case. Anybody have any request to remove this item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Rivera Malpieri.
Second, Williams.
Second by Williams. Movement was Director Rivera Malpieri. Are there any discussion on this action item? Seeing none, are there any no votes? Seeing none, then this passes 14-0. There are no recommended actions to come before the board this evening. Are there any other matters to come before the board? Director Williams, I see your hand.
Yes, hi, thank you, Chair. I just want to note that a number of my constituents have commented about the inability to use any type of a restroom facility, either in Union Station or in the bus concourse, and that is difficult if you are transferring, if you have a long commute from one end to the other, and that there is no ability to have any kind of a comfort break in between. So I did want to call that to our attention since they have made some serious effort to call that to mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Williams. Director Tisdale, you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. At the risk of piling on, I will join in the comments of Director Williams relative to that and incorporate by reference the comment that was made earlier during the public session regarding use of facilities. It's something that we need to address. And I recognize that we are in the course of doing an overall revamp of how situations are addressed at Denver Union Station regarding so-called violence or drug usage, which I think is not so called. The situation arises that we need in the meanwhile to deal with the necessity to address human functions. So whatever we can do to accelerate that process, I think would be appreciated by all. Secondly, and I'm sorry, I have three things briefly. Second thing, thank you for the report relative to the in-person meetings probably in the fall, and for stating that the reason is associated with IT improvements that we're doing in the RT&D conference rooms so that we all understand that's why we're not gathering together. Third, briefly, it used to be under other business that this was an opportunity for directors to report on their activities that they had over the course of the prior month in terms of meetings with other governmental agencies, with institutions, with constituents, and so forth. A couple of years ago, we stopped doing that. And I just want to suggest that I think it would actually be beneficial to restore that custom and to afford that opportunity to the directors. So I leave that to the collective consideration of all. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's all that I had.
Thank you, Director Tisdale, and I will ask Ms. McManus if you could add that to our next executive committee agenda before I forget. We'll talk about it then. Thanks, Director Tisdale. Director Whitmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a brief governmental affairs tidbit. As you all recall, on April 12th, we unanimously approved support of SB 22-180, programs to reduce ozone through increased transit. It is our intent, depending on the time of the day, that either myself or Director Geisinger gives a very short bit of testimony in support of that bill on Thursday afternoon in the House Energy and Environment Committee. So that will be happening. scheduled right at 1:30, but this time of year floor work could morph into the afternoon. So not sure about the time, but hoping for 1:30. That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Director Whitmore. Director Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly echo some of the concerns that were brought up about the use of facilities by our passengers at Denver Union Station. And another issue that I'd like to bring up, and as we all are, and as we've discussed at every board meeting, the issues of safety and drug use and things like that on the system. I heard from a gentleman who really had me on the phone for over a half an hour, and Mr. Porterfield. And so he said, look, we really do need to make this one of our highest priorities, which, I assured him that we are doing. And so in that vein, I know that the legislature is considering House Bill 1326, which Mr. Davies has, kept on our monitoring list. And that's in regards to the fentanyl issue. So what I would suggest is possibly our board looking at that bill and considering whether we would like to support it. I understand that our next board meeting is not until May 24th, which is after the legislative session ends, but it would be probably before the governors had a chance to sign that bill. So just bringing that bill up for a possible consideration for support by the board as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks for that, those comments. It's appreciated. Director Rivera-Malpetti, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to take a moment to talk about a great man that we lost last Friday, Dennis Gallagher. A lot of you've known Dennis. He was a mentor to me, and I remember when he ran for mayor against Federico Pena, bigger than life and such an advocate for transit. And I know that he was an advocate for so many of us. We could call him any time of the day or night for any kind of support or wisdom. So I just wanted to take a moment to do a moment of silence in his honor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And a lot of us dealings with Dennis Gallagher. He could speak extemporaneously and intelligently on just about any subject you could ask him about. Incredible person.
And in multiple languages. Gaelic was his other language, but I think he spoke something like 15 languages. He was just extraordinary. So yeah, we're going to miss him.
Yeah. Any other matters to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Director Whitmore is the movement. Director Rivera-Malpetti, the second. Anybody opposed? Of course not. I see that we are now adjourned at 6:32 p.m. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for participating.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.